He is a former assistant at A&M who was around and helped A&M put together one of the greatest recruiting classes in the history of recruiting. And then he went to another place that probably has, top or bottom 10 resources or, most challenges in recruiting and turned them around very quickly. I thought that this was the exact type of hire that A&M needed to make and should make. And, it wasn't flash, it wasn't flare, it wasn't crazy, it wasn't a bunch of money being thrown around and trying to, win the day. It just seems like a functional, appropriate, and may I say, non-insane hire for a coaching search that went off the walls in past midnight on Saturday night with Mark Stoops is coming, then he's going, and there was he was the head coach for 3 hours, and then it didn't happen. I think that it might have worked out that A&M just did what they did the right thing, even if it wasn't flashy.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately you have somebody who obviously you have the recruiting piece. At Duke, you had a pretty salty defense, a really dynamic offense. If you're looking for negatives from this hire, it's pretty much just experience. But you got to like what he's done at Duke. Winning at levels that, like you said, Ari, is really hard to do. Now, I think the challenge of turning Duke into a consistent winner and trying to build A&M up to a 10-win, 11-win, 12-win, 13, 14-win team, maybe, is a different kind of challenge. And that poses some questions. But when I look at Mike Elko taking over at A&M, we've talked about this, Ari. We both agree it's a top 5 job in the sport. If you're looking for reasons to believe that he can't win big at A&M, I think you're going to be looking for a while. It's not the sexiest hire you're ever going to see, but you have somebody that wants to be at A&M, that understands A&M. That's, like Dabo's the best example. A&M's a weird place. Sorry, it just is. Like, I think that they embrace their weird. It's a very unique, and I use that term very liberally, place. And I think some people, when they aren't familiar with it, it can be a little off-putting. Okay, A&M is what A&M is. Elko knows that stuff. He's familiar with it. He's not going to be confused if somebody says "good bull" at him. So
that's good bull.
Thank you. And ultimately, I think that really does matter. So it's a good hire. It's not going to get anybody excited or be talking about, A&M's going to win a national championship next year, but he's a competent coach that understands how to win in the new era of college football, and you have the backing of a lot of money for everything that you could possibly need there. So
does it concern you? Well, let me, Antonio and I like to argue with each other a lot, but let's do it. He rolled his eyes at us at the beginning of the show before we started recording at the notion that A&M is not a top 5 job in America. And I'd love to know.
No, I asked if the shenanigans that went on last night is a strike against your argument that this is a top 5 job.
Do you feel like a fan revolt having any impact on the people in power's decision is unhealthy?
I do. I do think it's unhealthy. So, do you guys think there's a major difference between like Mark Stoops and Mike Elko?
I don't.
I think Mark Stoops is a lot more proven. I think that some of the revolt around that was a little disrespectful for Mark Stoops, who I think you can make a really compelling case as the 3rd best coach in the SEC. But I think like the results, I don't think would be markedly different. I think it's a different kind of challenge. I think sustaining wins at Kentucky and building a decent program into a champion are 2 very, very different tasks. I think they both would be capable of doing it. I don't have that big of a problem. I get why people are frustrated with Mark Stoops. I think the idea was like, well, he's never won big. And I think people don't understand how hard that is to do at Kentucky. And so like, I get like, I think casual fans, especially A&M fans, clearly they don't understand how
it would have been
Coach Mark
really fun to see Mark Stoops with players.
It is. It's like a Bill Snyder question.
Yeah. And I also thought that was a reasonable hire that makes a lot of sense from both aspects of it. So I don't really think like they went from Mark Stoops to, Drake. Like, I think they wanted to get like the epitome of the sport and prove that A&M is a top 5 job in America. And it's like, the one thing that I think that you could probably say for Elko is that he's had a front row seat on how to assemble one of the greatest classes in the history of the sport at the place he's going to, which I think puts you in a position to maybe be more equipped to understand the expectation and what it takes to actually do that, which, is probably a pretty big deal. That said, I don't know if like you said, building up Duke in a short amount of time or building up Kentucky is the same job as trying to win a national championship and beat Alabama.
We had a comment that said Stoops is older and his ceiling is known. No. Stoops is older and Kentucky's ceiling is known. I don't think we know what Mark Stoops' ceiling is. And I think we would have found out at A&M. Ultimately, it is what it is. Like, I think he'll be happy at Kentucky. It's a great job. He'll be fine. I just found the revolts a little disrespectful.
Also, too, let's also acknowledge the fact that Mark Stoops has one of the best jobs in America, too, from a coaching standpoint. Like, he is getting paid quite a bit of money and has a huge buyout, and really is only expected to win 7 or 6 games a year to keep his job. And if he wins 9, he's the Bear Bryant of that place. So, that
is that above or below A&M in the top 5?
No, I said top 10 in terms of coach experience. I think A&M's a top 5 job in totality based on what they can pay you, what the last buyout was, where it's located on the map, the resources you have in NIL, the desperation of administration and fans to actually win. I think you can go there and do things that you cannot do at most other places. Everything that you need to win a national championship is in place at A&M. And I don't know that that is the case for more than 12 jobs total. And then once you go from that, then you whittle it down from those 12 jobs. And at A&M, if you get fired, your grandchildren's grandchildren can drive a Rolls Royce to public school or to private school in 2137, and it'll be fine because you have so much money. So
I think the best way we've mentioned on the show before, but Antonio, the best way to describe it is if A&M in the next 5 years became the next Georgia, won back-to-back national championships and did all this stuff, nobody would be looking around going, how are they doing this? People would be saying, yeah, about time. You have incredible facilities.
Or they finally got somebody who can do it. I told the story on Twitter because somebody asked me, he goes, if you think it's a top 5 job, would you invest into that stock with your own money right now? And I said, I had a story, and I don't know if this is too inside baseball of my life, but when my neighbor and closest friend when I was a kid, his father owned a computer store called Apple or Computer Town. And this store sold Macs before the creation of the iPod. And this store went belly up because Mac wasn't cool yet. Do you guys remember what Apple was like before Apple was cool?
A little bit.
Then 6 months after the store closed, I believe Apple came out with the iPod, and then it became what it is today. That was the thing that made it trendy. It got people into the stores. It got people buying iMacs and MacBook Pros. And now Apple, I think, is one of the best, if not the best company in the entire world. And it's like, I felt really bad even as a kid knowing what happened there, but also now thinking about A&M as Apple, I feel like A&M is pre-iPod Apple. And if they get Steve Jobs, who knows how to work the place, then they could be Apple one day. And that doesn't mean that they'll get Steve Jobs or that even exists. It's really hard to find Steve Jobs, but if you find Steve Jobs, you have a corporation that has the ability and the wherewithal to take over the world. So I would not invest in Apple in 1999. I wouldn't invest in Apple in 2001. People who did are very, very rich and will never have to work again. But I certainly would have invested and have invested a large portion of my paychecks every month into Apple now. It changes. It's not the same thing. So I don't know if that makes sense or not, but why don't we... does that make sense? Am I nuts? Antonio, you're like smirking at me. I never know if you're like, this guy's an idiot, or if I changed your mind at all.
No, you haven't. I'll just look at 100 years of data and then I'll let that support myself.
All right.
I'm going to lose my mind because it's not. Okay.